Okay, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unraveling one of the absolute wildest legends of the 20th century. We're talking about an ancient Egyptian artifact that somehow, defying all logic and honestly basic geography, got blamed for the most famous maritime disaster in human history.
I mean, did an ancient Egyptian curse actually sink the Titanic? It sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster, right? But the myth goes exactly like this. A smuggled, cursed mummy of a high priestess of Amun-Ra brought the terrible, swift wrath of the ancient gods down upon the unsinkable ship. It's this massive story that's captivated people for over a century, mixing the real-life tragedy of the Titanic with, the dark allure of the occult. But where did this even come from?
Well, if we pull back the curtain and look at the actual historical record, the true cargo manifest of the Titanic, we see exactly what was sitting in that hold. We're talking feathers, hatter's fur, auto parts, rabbit hair, elastics. You know what we definitely do not see? A smuggled mummy. Literally 0 mummies were on board the Titanic. Period. End of story. And this is just a perfect example of how a myth, once it gets rolling, completely snowballs out of control. Because the tabloids and rumor mills, they weren't satisfied with the artifact just sinking the Titanic. Oh no. The legend evolved to claim this cursed mummy was secretly rescued in a lifeboat, smuggled into New York, and then sent back across the ocean, where it supposedly sank the Empress of Ireland in 1914. And then it supposedly survived that too, got put on the Lusitania, and sank that in 1915. It's a mythical maritime trail of terror that literally ignores reality. Section 1. Meet Artifact 22542. The mummy that wasn't. So let's get grounded in pure fact for a second. Artifact 22542? It's not even a mummy. Seriously, it's just a wooden inner coffin lid, a mummy board made of wood and plasterboard. It dates back to around 950 to 900 BC, found in Thebes, and it features the face of an unknown woman. Though, of course, early guesses wildly speculated she was some royal priestess. But here is the absolutely crucial part. It was donated to the British Museum in 1889, and it has sat safely in room 62 ever since. It never, ever left London to board the Titanic. So, if the artifact never left a museum, how on earth did this curse start? Section 2. A trail of Victorian terror, tracing the curse back to the source. Okay. So the origins of this curse trace back to the 1860s and 80s, to a wealthy Oxford graduate named Thomas Douglas Murray. He buys the coffin lid in Cairo, and what followed was an absolutely astonishing string of violent misfortunes. I mean, just days after the purchase, Murray's shotgun literally explodes while he's duck hunting on the Nile, and he ends up losing his arm. Then, on the journey back to England, 2 of his companions die. And once the artifact finally arrives in London, servants who allegedly mishandled or mocked the relic met their own sudden ends. So almost overnight, the board's dark reputation was officially cemented in Victorian high society. And the legend quickly escalated from a streak of really bad luck to full-blown supernatural horror. Because as this board was passed around to different homes in London, owners started reporting phantom footsteps, heavy tramping on the stairs, and literally every piece of glass in one home mysteriously shattering. Photographers who tried to capture the board claimed their developed plates showed a living, glowering woman's face. And shortly after, those same photographers met with tragic accidents. Even the British Museum wasn't spared. Night watchmen there reported hammerings, sobs, and full-on poltergeist activity. Section 3. The tabloid spin machine. How the media manufactured a monster. So who actually created this curse? Because this wasn't just some spooky campfire story. It was a massive media phenomenon driven by the emerging Victorian tabloid press. Ambitious journalists looked at this artifact and just saw absolute gold for selling newspapers. Take Bertram Fletcher Robinson, right? He's this dashing reporter for the Daily Express, and in 1904 he publishes a front-page article titled "A Priestess of Death." He wrote, and I quote, "It is certain that the Egyptians had powers which we in the 20th century may laugh at, yet can never understand." He was actively fueling this public hysteria with super dramatic, supernatural speculation. But then, reality takes a very tragic turn. Just 3 years after his investigation started, Robinson suddenly dies of typhoid fever. He was only 36 years old, and almost immediately, the tabloids and his peers weaponized this real-life tragedy, holding it up to the public as undeniable, stone-cold proof of the mummy's wrath. And the reaction from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle really shows us exactly how powerful this hysteria had become. The creator of the highly logical Sherlock Holmes was actually a staunch spiritualist himself. He publicly stated, I told him he was tempting fate. The immediate cause of death was typhoid fever, but that is the way in which the elementals guarding the mummy might act. Think about that for a second. Even the greatest minds of the time were twisting basic biological facts to support their deep belief in curses. Which brings us directly back to the Titanic. So, how did the mummy supposedly get on the ship? Well, it didn't. But a journalist named W.T. Stead did. Stead was a pioneer of tabloid journalism and a huge, passionate spiritualist. On April 12, 1912, literally just days before the ship sank, Stead entertained his dinner companions with the terrifying ghost story of the British Museum's cursed mummy. Tragically, Stead perished in the sinking, but in the aftermath, traumatized survivors recounted his captivating story to the press, and the public simply conflated Stead's dinner table ghost story with the actual physical cargo of the ship. Boom, the Titanic myth was born.
Section 4. Why we believe myths. The psychology and history behind the hysteria. For our final section, we really have to ask the big question. Why on earth was Victorian society so eager to believe in a vengeful Egyptian spirit in the first place? Well, it was a cultural perfect storm. First, you had Egyptomania, this massive public obsession with newly excavated ancient tombs. Then you had the rise of spiritualism, where throwing a seance was just standard drawing room entertainment. Add to that the birth of tabloid journalism, which was more than ready to print sensational headlines whether they were true or not. And finally, bubbling underneath all of it, was a very deep, unspoken colonial anxiety. And this is a super crucial piece of the puzzle. In 1882, the British violently bombarded Alexandria and occupied Egypt. Now, while it was framed back home as a huge military success, a lot of the public felt deep, underlying guilt and apprehension about, intervening in another country and basically taking their sacred artifacts. As one historian noted, you couldn't really talk openly about the effects of the occupation without sounding unpatriotic. So these spooky tales of cursed artifacts exacting their revenge, they actually served as a psychological outlet for all that national guilt.
The cognitive science behind this is absolutely fascinating too. Like, why do our brains fall for this stuff? Psychologists explain that we basically use two types of thinking. Low-level processing is quick. It's our automatic, easy acceptance of a good, spooky narrative. High-level processing, on the other hand, requires difficult, analytical thinking to look at random coincidences and actually debunk them. Simply put, human brains just naturally prefer an easy, thrilling story over doing the hard work of processing complex, random coincidences.
And museums themselves create this fascinating paradox. We take these sacred, ancient objects, totally strip them of their original context, slap an inventory number on them, and encase them in glass. We're trying to push the magic and the mystery away with science and categorization. But psychologically, that clinical separation often only intensifies our desire to mythologize the object. Deep down, we kind of want the magic to fight back.
As one psychologist put it perfectly, you can bury superstitions under a mountain of evidence, but they will always climb right out. The unlucky mummy never sank the Titanic, but it absolutely captured our real fears of technology, imperialism, and the unknown. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. As we face our own rapidly changing world today, what modern myths are we building right now? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.